The day I stopped sending the money, my brother's ghost showed up in my kitchen. Not literally. Daniel wasn't the kind of man who believed in that sort of thing, and neither was I, but there he was anyway, sitting at my table in the gray morning light, wearing that old flannel shirt he'd patched at the elbows 3 times because he said throwing away a good shirt was a sin. I could smell the coffee I'd just made, and underneath it something else, something like smoke, like charred wood, like the inside of a warehouse that had swallowed my brother whole on a Tuesday in November, 18 months ago. I set down my mug. The chair across from me was empty. But Daniel was there, I knew it. My brother was the kind of man people wrote eulogies about and actually meant every word. Not the polished, careful kind of eulogy where someone reaches for adjectives like hardworking and devoted because they can't think of anything specific. People at Daniel's funeral told stories. Real ones. The guy he'd helped move an entire apartment up 4 flights of stairs during a heat wave, refusing lunch money, refusing beer, just helping because the guy was new in town and didn't know anyone. The woman from his old neighborhood who said Daniel had shoveled her driveway every winter for 6 years and never once knocked on her door to be thanked. He was 3 years older than me. He taught me how to ride a bike, how to throw a punch, how to apologize to someone you'd wronged without making the apology about yourself. He was the first person I called when my marriage almost fell apart, and the only person I told when it did. The fire at Carver Industrial Supply on Route 9 killed 4 men. Daniel was one of them. Faulty electrical panel, the investigators said. No sprinkler system up to code. There was a lawsuit in progress. There would be for years, probably, but lawsuits don't keep the heat on in February. Lawsuits don't buy school shoes for a 9-year-old girl named Sophie who had her father's eyes. So I sent $1,500 a month, every first of the month. A bank transfer to my sister-in-law, Renata, with a note that said simply, "For you and Sophie. Marcus." I didn't talk about it. I didn't want thanks. It was just what you did. My neighbor's name was Cliff Ohan. Retired. Walked his dog, a barrel-chested beagle named Theo, every morning at 7, and if you were out checking your mail or pulling your car out of the driveway, Cliff would stop and talk for as long as you let him. He wasn't malicious about it. He was just lonely and had a lot of opinions about municipal water quality and the designated hitter rule. I didn't mind Cliff. He'd helped me put up a fence the summer before, and he'd brought a casserole to my door the week after Daniel died without making a production of it. Just left it on the porch with a sticky note that said heat at 350 for 25 min. I'd eaten it for 4 days straight. It was a Saturday in October when Cliff said the thing that changed everything. I was raking leaves. He was walking Theo. Standard weekend choreography. He stopped at the edge of my lawn, let Theo sniff the fence post, and said casually, the way you say things you've been holding for a while, "I saw your sister-in-law at the casino up on Route 44 last weekend. The big one. Looked like she was having quite a night." I kept raking, Renata. That her name, the widow with the dark hair, he scratched the back of his neck. She was at one of those high-roller tables, you know, the ones in the back with the velvet ropes, drinking champagne, had one of those little clutch purses that cost more than my first car. He paused. "Not my business, I know. I just thought, well, after what happened to your brother, I thought maybe you'd want to know." He walked on. Theo waddled happily behind him. I stood there with the rake in my hands and the leaves piling up against my shoes, and felt something cold move through my chest that had nothing to do with the October air. I didn't do anything rash. That was the thing I was most proud of later. I didn't call Renata and say anything accusatory. I didn't cut off the transfer that month. I didn't even tell my mother, who was 71 and had a heart that had already been through enough. I did something harder. I paid attention. I drove past Renata's house the following Tuesday evening, the kind of casual drive that wasn't casual at all. The house looked the same, modest split level, same as always. Daniel's old truck still in the driveway because Renata didn't have the heart to sell it. But there was a new car parked at the curb. A white SUV, late model, clean. I didn't recognize it. The month after Cliff's comment, I sent the 1500 as usual, but I added something. I called Sophie's school. I was listed as emergency contact, had been since Daniel died, and asked how Sophie was doing. The secretary said Sophie was lovely, very quiet lately, had missed 3 days last month but seemed to be catching up fine. 3 days during the school week. I thought about Daniel. I thought about that flannel shirt. I thought about the way he used to say, "You take care of your people, Marcus. That's the whole job. That's the only job." Then I thought about how taking care of your people sometimes means asking hard questions. I invited Renata and Sophie to dinner on a Sunday. My mother came too. It was a normal dinner, the kind families have when they're trying to pretend things are normal: roast chicken, Sophie drawing horses on a paper napkin, my mother talking too much to fill the silence Daniel used to fill without even trying. I watched Renata. She was thinner than she'd been at Christmas. Her nails were done beautifully. She laughed a few times, real laughs, which surprised me. At the end of the night, when Sophie was asleep on the couch and my mother was washing dishes despite being asked not to, Renata sat at the kitchen table and poured herself the last of the wine and said, without looking at me, "Cliff Ohan talked to you, didn't he?" It wasn't a question. I sat down across from her, the same chair where Daniel had appeared to me that gray morning. He mentioned something, yeah. She nodded, turned the wine glass in her hands. I figured he's not a subtle man. "Renata." "I'm not gambling it away, Marcus." She looked up. Her eyes were steady, but there was something exhausted behind them, something that had been tired for a very long time. "I need you to know that. Sophie's college account has been funded. The mortgage is ahead by 4 months. The car, yes, I leased a car. The old one was dying, and I needed something reliable to get Sophie to her appointments." "Appointments?" Renata was quiet for a moment. "Sophie has been seeing a grief counselor since March. A good one. Not the one the school district provides. That woman sees 40 kids a week and barely remembers their names. A real one. It's $400 a session. And Sophie needs 2 sessions a week. And I will spend every cent I have, and every cent you give me, to make sure my daughter doesn't grow up with her father's death living inside her like a stone she can't put down." I said nothing. "The casino night," she said. "My friend Petra had a birthday. First time I've been out, actually out, not grocery shopping, not a school pickup, but out since Daniel died. I drank champagne. I played $20 on blackjack and lost it and didn't care. I sat at a table with velvet ropes because Petra is better at life than I am, and somehow I felt, for about 2 hours, like a person who was allowed to exist in the world and maybe even enjoy it. Her voice was even, not defensive. Just tired and clear. I don't think that makes me a bad person, Marcus. I don't think Daniel would think so either. I thought about my brother, his patience, the way he never punished people for being human. No, I said, he wouldn't. The white SUV, I found out, belonged to Renata's cousin who'd been staying in the spare room for 6 weeks while she looked for an apartment. Sophie's missed school days were for the grief counseling appointments, which Renata had since moved to afternoons. The clutch purse was Petra's. I'm not proud of the 2 months I spent building a case in my head. I'm not proud of the way I'd started to look at Renata, my brother's wife, the woman who'd loved him for 14 years, as a problem to be solved rather than a person carrying something almost unbearable. Cliff Ohan wasn't a bad man. He wasn't even wrong about what he'd seen. He just handed me a fragment and let my own fear dress it up as the whole picture. I still send the 1,500, every first of the month, for you and Sophie, Marcus, but I added something to the amount last January. Sophie's therapist says she's making real progress. She drew a picture of her dad last week, flannel shirt, patched elbows, and hung it on her bedroom wall. Some mornings I still come downstairs and feel Daniel in the kitchen. I make the coffee. I sit across from the empty chair. I don't think he's haunting me. I think he's just checking, the way he always did, to make sure I'm taking care of his people. I like to think I'm getting better at it. Not just sending the money, actually seeing the people. That's the whole job. That's the only job.